Live from Washington, this is BBC News. Reports say authorities have killed gunmen involved in a deadly attack on churches and a synagogue in the southern Russian Republic of Dagestan. Israel's prime minister says the intense phase of fighting against Hamas in Rafah is nearly over. And as a heat wave scorches the U.S., experts warn homeless people are in serious danger. Hello, I'm Nasman. Russian police have killed 5 gunmen who launched a deadly attack in the southern Russian Republic of Dagestan. That's according to Russian news agencies, citing the National Anti-Terrorism Committee. Now, Dagestan's governor said attackers killed at least 15 police officers and an Orthodox priest during a series of attacks in the cities of Derbent and Makhachkala. Now, 2 churches were targeted on the Orthodox festival of Pentecost, as well as a synagogue and a police checkpoint. 12 other police officers were wounded in the attacks. Well, in his first interview with an Israeli TV network since Israel's war on Hamas began in October, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said that the phase of intense fighting against the Palestinian armed group is coming to an end. Now, Netanyahu said that that would free up Israeli forces to be deployed to the northern border with Lebanon, where fighting with the Hezbollah armed group has escalated. More than 90,000 Israeli residents have evacuated the area amid exchanges of cross-border fire. There are concerns of a wider conflict breaking out in the region. Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant is here in Washington. He's expected to meet U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken on Monday. Those talks will likely focus on the next phase of the war in Gaza and the hostilities between Israel and Hezbollah. Mr. Netanyahu has meanwhile appeared to change course on a U.S.-backed deal that would end the war, and it was also approved earlier by his war cabinet. He now says he's ready to accept a partial deal that will bring some of the hostages home while the war continues. Mr. Netanyahu has said that Hamas must be destroyed before the war concludes. Meanwhile, in Gaza, 8 Palestinians were killed Sunday in an Israeli airstrike near Gaza City. Witnesses say that the attack hit part of a college run by the UN Palestinian Refugee Agency, which was providing aid to families. In the occupied West Bank, the Israeli military has admitted its forces violated protocol by strapping a wounded Palestinian man to a jeep during what it called a counter-terrorism operation in the city of Jenin on Saturday. A warning that viewers may find the video we're about to show you distressing. This is the man in the footage. You can see him lying across the front of a vehicle as it drives past 2 ambulances. We've decided to blur the image. His family said that he was injured during the raid by Israeli soldiers. The IDF confirmed the incident, saying it violated orders, adding that it would be investigated and dealt with accordingly. Our correspondent in Jerusalem, Sebastian Usher, has more. To Kenya now, where the country's President William Ruto has said he'll engage with young protesters opposed to the government's plan to hike taxes. The demonstrations were largely led by young people, and they caught the government off guard. 2 people died and dozens were injured during Thursday's protests in Nairobi and several other cities across the country. The government plans to raise $2.6 billion to finance its budget and reduce its debt. More than 100 million Americans remain under heat advisory alerts as temperatures remain stubbornly high across much of the U.S. This is a heat map from the U.S. National Weather Service. You can see areas with high temperatures. Those are in orange and red, and they are spread from coast to coast. A recent analysis of U.S. government data by the Associated Press showed that 2,300 people who died in the U.S. last summer had excessive heat listed on their death certificate. That's the highest number ever recorded. The advice from authorities is to seek shelter, ideally with air conditioning, but for the hundreds of thousands of Americans with no place to call home, that's not always an easy option. I spoke earlier to Donald Whitehead Jr. He's the executive director of the National Coalition for the Homeless, and he explained why heat waves are so dangerous for people living on the streets. And before we go, hundreds of competitors took part in this year's World Worm Charming Championship in Cheshire, England, using everything from forks to drums, trumpets. You can see them here, competitors doing their best to coax as many worms out of the ground as possible. Get this, the year's winner managed to convince 195 worms to surface from their hiding spots. Plenty more coming up at the top of the hour.